Welcome to Your Creatures. I'm Ricky Wirtz, and with me is Dr. Edward Bennett. And we have a very special show for you today because here in Pennsylvania, we've never really worried that much about heartworms. And like most dog owners, I'm used to just, okay, the vet said get it shot and you get the shot and it's taken care of. And I never really understood heartworms. And I think that you're really going to enjoy hearing about this serious problem for our dogs.
Yeah, this is a really good time of year to be talking about heartworms, Ricky, because the heartworm disease is spread by the bite of a mosquito. And what happens is that the mosquito will land on the dog, and they have a biting part called a proboscis, and that's their long mouth part that they put in to suck up the blood of the dog. And you would think that if it's spread by mosquitoes that they would be injecting the worm, and they're not. Actually, this worm then crawls outside along the outside of the biting part, outside of the proboscis, stays on the skin, and then when the mosquito leaves, it finds that tiny little, almost microscopic hole and starts to migrate through into the dog, into the pet, and find its way to a blood supply. And the blood supply that it tries to get to is the area of the blood that has the lowest oxygen content. And that turns out to be the lungs. Now, at first you think, well, wait a minute, the lungs, that's where all the oxygen is. But remember that blood going to the lungs doesn't have much oxygen in it. That's why it's going there. And then once it goes through the lungs, it gets all oxygenated, and then it goes back. So these worms like to go into the pulmonary artery and into the smaller vessels of the lungs where the blood supply is going just to get its oxygen. So it has a real low oxygen level. And these little teeny tiny worms, that's where they would love to stay, but they soon grow. And they can't stay in the lungs anymore. And so they back up and get into larger and larger and larger vessels until they end up in the pulmonary artery of the heart. And that's why we call them heartworms. And they get quite large. I brought in some samples of heartworms to show you.
Unbelievable.
They get almost a foot long.
A foot long?
Yes. And so that's the reason that, that they'll cause so much blockage, and that's also the reason why they'll end up in the pulmonary artery rather than being able to stay down in the lungs where they would really prefer to be.
Well, now these are from dogs who died.
Yes, unfortunately, these are dogs that I saw when I was in Georgia, and it is true. You know, you mentioned in Pennsylvania that it isn't quite as common, and that's true.
But it's getting more common.
Oh, absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely. But in Georgia, I would see dogs with heartworms certainly every month, even in a very small practice. And it's just devastating. These are patients also, by the way, that may have been on heartworm preventative, but the owners just forgot to give it 1 month, and that's all it took. And
1 month?
Yes, down there it's so prevalent that that can happen. That's happened to several clients of mine that I know were very conscientious about giving the preventative. And that's the key with this disease. You want to prevent it. You don't want to have to treat it. Because even though as devastating as this looks, and it does cause heart disease.
Well, when I looked at that, that looked like all kinds of spaghetti in there.
That's right.
And the whole thing is jammed with all that stuff in there.
That's right.
And they're all worms?
That's right. This is the heart of a dog, and this is the pulmonary artery. So this is where the blood would be coming out and then going to the lungs. And that whole artery, and this is just a portion of it.
Look at the worms in that.
Yeah, it's completely infiltrated.
It's just absolutely blocked.
It's amazing that the dog can live with this for a period of time, and they can for a while. But it does cause heart disease because just by its sheer blockage, you're blocking the vessel, in this case with these large adult worms.
And it comes from this little teeny tiny worm that comes in the hole,
the larva.
And it becomes all of this.
That's right.
And gets to each one of these.
Right. And there's dozens. That's right. And there's dozens of them typically that we'll find in the dog. And so you'll start to see signs of heart disease in dogs where you may see some exercise intolerance, particularly on real active dogs and working dogs. A lot of times with our couch potato pets, you don't notice things like that, but you can see other signs like a cough. Sometimes you will see no signs at all. And that's the reason that we do these screening tests each year, or if owners are on the heartworm preventative all year, we do it on a semi-annual basis, every 2 years. So we're constantly screening dogs for the presence of heartworms, and we always recommend, I always tell owners that in addition to food, water, and lots of love, they need to be on heartworm preventative. It's a daily available, so they have to give that every day, which many owners like to do, but you never ever want to miss a day. And the more common way to give it is with the new monthly preventatives, and that's given on the same date each month. And we recommend giving it year-round. Actually, in Pennsylvania, you strictly speaking, we could stop during the winter time, and since it is spread by a mosquito, we'd be pretty safe in not giving it during the winter. But what we find is that over 90% of our owners forget about starting again.
Starting in time.
In the early spring, yes. And so they'll come in, and things will happen. They'll come in June or July, and we'll talk about heartworm preventative, and they'll say, oh, yes, well, we gave it last year. We forgot, we haven't started yet this year. And so we try to encourage owners to stay on it all year. Some of the monthly heartworm preventatives also happen to help prevent other intestinal parasites as well. So it makes sense to stay on it year-round since that's the case.
And they don't have a negative reaction to the medication or anything.
That's right. That's right. It's a very safe medication.
It's safe, and it certainly would help against something like this. Well, we'll be back to talk a little bit more about heartworms, but right now we have a pet, and as you know, we try to find homes for homeless animals, and this one needs a home. Maybe yours? I just wanted to ask, Dr. Bennett, do cats get heartworm?
Yes, this is something that is new in veterinary medicine, that we're finding that about 10% of the cases that you see in dogs can occur, that number can occur in cats. And so the problem with cats is that we don't have a good test in order to detect it, and the problem is that really the way we find it in most cases, unfortunately, is after they've died. So what we're strongly recommending, particularly in the highly endemic areas, is to have cats on the new preventative, which has just come out. And it's a monthly preventative that's now available for cats, and it's a chewable that most cats will like just as a treat. But if they don't, you can just crumble it up into their food and give it to your cat once a month. Again, the problem with cats is that we don't have a good test in order to detect it, and it can be deadly. They don't get as many worms as the dogs do. Usually they'll only get about 3 to 5 worms, as a matter of fact. But when those worms die, they go into the lungs, they cause a pulmonary embolus, and they can be fatal.
Lose your cat.
Absolutely.
Oh, my. Well, thank you for this. Boy, were you eating? I hope not. But it's so important that we know these things about our pets. Thank you so much for being with us, and take care and love your little doggy and cat this weekend and enjoy them. And if you have any questions that you want Dr. Bennett to answer, please call 622-1560. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back Monday. See you then. Bye.